and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be focusing on Pakistan-US relations in light of the recent developments and a number of engagements that have taken place, particularly with reference to bilateral cooperation with regards to defense and military ties. This, of course, comes in the aftermath of the visit that was earlier held by a defense delegation led by the Chief of General Staff that was held in Washington from Monday to Thursday this week, followed by, of course, the visit of the Counselor of State Department, Mr. Derek Chollet, who's currently in Islamabad, and then, of course, the kind of statements that have been coming in from the Counselor and the spokesperson as well with regards to what this means in terms of future engagements between Pakistan and the US. However, there hasn't been any clear statement with regards to rebooting of the strategic cooperation in the past that was halted in the Trump era. But in terms of the emphasis that has been laid on this relationship, the US has been very clear that Pakistan is an important strategic partner. And then, of course, with regards to the issue of terrorism as well, it is something that holds importance to the US also, and that threats that exist to Pakistan at the moment can in turn be threats to the US in the future as well. And so a lot of discussion with regards to counterterrorism is also something which took center stage. There seems to be a counterterrorism dialogue that is also going to be held next month. But in terms of how this is going to go ahead, in terms of any tangible plan of action with the US considering the upsurge in terrorist activities within Pakistan, particularly after the end of the ceasefire by the TTP, and then, of course, in the last month alone, where we saw numerous attacks, particularly in the province of KP, and then, of course, in the police lines in Peshawar as well, where a large number of people lost their lives. It still it remains unclear exactly how this cooperation is to go ahead and how Pakistan will make its decisions regarding security matters at home. The issue of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan is also an important one that is going to be part of our discussion, particularly in light of the report by the US Institute of Peace that has focused on the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, talking about, of course, the way that they provide safe havens to the TTP, that they back the TTP, that the support is there by the Taliban regime to the TTP organization, both within Afghanistan and, of course, with regards to their activities within Pakistan as well. And this is something that is not restricted to the Taliban, but is also part of the perception of Afghans as well. And, of course, we know that a number of Afghans were involved in the terrorist activities within Pakistan as well. So how Pakistan will be able to take care of this matter, considering the support that is coming in evidently in this report from the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, and then, of course, in light of the huge economic crisis that Pakistan still continues to face, which is another aspect that is important and has been cited in terms of our ability to be able to launch a full-scale attack or an operation against the terrorist organizations within the country, particularly the TTP. So this is going to be our focus in the show today, and we're going to try and understand where all of this is headed for this, of course, and more discussions with regards to where Pakistan is going. I have been joined in the studios by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined on telephone line by Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's a senior journalist, and we're hoping to also connect with Mr. Michael Kugelman, who's the director, South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. But we'll, of course, take a look at all of the situation and go ahead and understand what is really going on. But Farrukh, considering, of course, the way that we have seen the situation and the relationship between Pakistan and the US evolve, we have seen that, of course, the issue of strategic ties, particularly with regards to defense cooperation, is an important one for Pakistan. And then we also saw a dip in the relationship with regards to the political agenda that had been put forward by the former Prime Minister. And then, of course, the kind of support that has been stalled as part of the Trump era as well. And then, of course, there is the current economic condition that Pakistan is dealing with. And so the trade and investment ties is an important aspect to look at as well. How do you see our relationship with the US in terms of the kind of issues that we face? Of course, our priorities with regards to the economic security and, of course, the security of our people at home is an important one. But how exactly can the US be able to support us as an important partner?
Thank you, Sana. I think that one thing that we need to keep reminding ourselves is that Pakistan and US have one of the most enduring relationships. While I understand that there is humongous denial on both sides, I think that the support to each other was existential in nature, and that has been going on. Pakistan's military capacity was not even half before we actually started or entered into a defense pact with the US. That is back in 50s and 60s. Since then, Pakistan's capacity has increased, and Pakistan twice has actually been a decisive factor in changing the course of history. One during the Cold War era, the second one, of course, against the war on terror. And Pakistan has been a very reliable partner, while, of course, the propaganda on both sides will keep on undermining it. So at this moment, it is heartening to see that both countries are warming up to each other. And another great thing is that in the past, when Pakistan was actually, framed with India, and usually they used to talk about Indo-Pak or India and Pakistan. And after that, because India was ascendant, in the end, we kept on hearing very absurd terms like F-Pak. So at this moment, relationship with Pakistan is not focused on India or Afghanistan. Primarily, it is about 200 million people, and that is very heartening that the US is now finally looking at us as a potential ally, I should say, because of course earlier you said that strategic partner, we are not designated as such, but we are thought to be a very crucial partner in the region. Right now, while the strategic dialogue that you were alluding to has not been rebooted, but I keep on seeing the reference to all those major headers that were there during the strategic dialogue. For example, agriculture, energy, water, economic cooperation, trade, climate change, and umpteen other things. So I think that we are building momentum towards working together again.
Okay, let me also welcome in the discussion Mr. Anwar Iqbal, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for joining us and taking the time out. We're of course talking about the US-Pakistan relationship, particularly in light of the strategic partnership that can help us, particularly in the upsurge of terrorist activities within the country. And as Farrukh was saying, a lot of the aspects have been mentioned and emphasized in terms of what that entails. But it is still unclear how exactly that is going to unfold in terms of an actionable plan, or some sort of tangible measures that can be taken by the US with regards to this cooperation. How much of it do you expect can actually turn into something perhaps more than what is being said now? Because there have been strong statements coming in, but again, the kind of certainty that we need in terms of the cooperation at a level where we can see an action, that perhaps still isn't clear. How do you see moving forward, or the extent of the support that can be given to Pakistan in this regard?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I think we have not yet reached a stage where we could talk about how much support we are going to get, or how the new relationship will work out. What is obvious is that both countries have decided to rebuild the relationship. And as Farrukh pointed out, you once again see the subjects that we used to talk about when we had a strategic partnership, like economic cooperation, agriculture, food security, and above all, the war against terror. I think the meeting that was held here in Washington, and I think I attended yesterday, that was a very crucial meeting where they talked about the nitty-gritty of dealing with the threat of terrorism, which once again is becoming a major threat in Pakistan. And that will, I think, determine how we move forward.
Right. There's also, of course, the aspect of the report that the US Institute of Peace has released with regards to the role that the Afghan Taliban are playing in terms of providing safe havens to the TTP. This, of course, is an important concerning factor for Pakistan, and we've been dealing with the upsurge in terrorist activities with regards to the TTP. But in terms of what the report says, of course, the reliance that existed in the past with regards to the Afghan Taliban extending support to Pakistan, that is isn't there. And if this is something that that a US think tank can talk about, what can be done in terms of the way that Pakistan and the US can then perhaps have at least some sort of information sharing on the ground in terms of what is going on and how to deal with the Afghan Taliban support in this regard?
Well, obviously, information sharing is the first step, and I think they're already doing that. But you have to move forward and do something more substantial. And the thing is, first, both countries need to decide how much involvement they want from the other. I mean, in some circumstances, the support could become counterproductive. I mean, Islamabad has to decide whether it wants to take on the Taliban or it wants to stop the infiltrators at the border. It wants to conduct cross-border raid. It wants to engage the Taliban and talk it out. Those decisions have to be taken in Islamabad. I think Americans are willing to support whatever decision Pakistan takes. And if Pakistan decides to take on the TTP militants inside Pakistan, Americans will support it. I don't know how would they react, but I think it will not be negative if Pakistan decides to conduct strikes inside Afghanistan. But first, Islamabad has to, worry about its own concerns. I mean, what Pakistan wants to do, will it be good for Pakistan or will it be counterproductive? So a lot of decisions have to be taken in Islamabad now.
Right, and we'll talk more about that. But Farrukh, there is also, of course, the concern with regards to what was questioned from the US State Department spokesperson regarding, of course, the PTI chairman's blame game, or how he has, of course, talked about the US-led conspiracy, of course, now backtracking from those statements. I understand that his response focused on how perhaps the US isn't much concerned with different political parties and stances and is okay with whatever civilian setup exists within the country. But in terms of the approaches that exist with different parties and how, of course, when we talk about especially terrorism, there have been different ways that different parties or leadership have dealt with it, particularly the PTI in the past. How exactly do you think that this actually measures out in terms of real dynamics between two countries as to who is in power?
You're talking about the PTI's famous U-turn, right? On one side, they keep on bad mouthing America. On the other side, we saw another picture, where Fawad Chaudhry is meeting, Mr. Shollet, and that was amazing as well. So there is always this chance that any political party that might actually in public have a muscular or, some kind of populist stance against the US. In private, they will also be trying to rebuild or build that relationship with the US. Regarding Pakistan's national interest and how Pakistan sees itself and how it sees the partnership with the US, I think there has to be a mix of various factors, right? Which political party or leader is actually ruling the country also matters, but the fact is that there is a lot of muscle memory and there's a lot of residual, memory as well that actually works. Of course, there are times when you see a lot of bitterness actually rising in the environment, and then you have to actually curtail that. But I think that no matter whosoever is in power, they will be not doing anything that actually offends one power or the other. So our relationship with the US will continue to strengthen. Since you asked earlier regarding war on terror as well, one very important area where we have been cooperating so far, and I hope that our cooperation is going to increase, is Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Because last time when the military delegates had come from the US, they were taken to that border, and it was then we were informed that the US has actually worked a lot to help Pakistan in reinforcing its defenses on the border, and it will continue to do that. And now that will also answer how Afghanistan is actually impacting Pakistan. If you actually man your border and you can secure your border, then half the battle is already won.
Mr. Anwar, there is also the concern regarding Pakistan's current economic woes that have been cited in this report as well, and then, of course, in general, in terms of how this partnership is going to proceed. And that perhaps may be a concern that is shared in any sort of bilateral engagement that we have. But the US, of course, is making statements with regards to its support, considering the IMF and other international financial institutions. And of course, meanwhile, we also know that the reasoning behind the Afghan Taliban not shying away from supporting the TTP, one of the reasons that has been cited for it is that Pakistan perhaps cannot afford full-scale operation against the TTP. How true do you think that is? And in terms of the relationship that the US is talking about with IMF and other international financial institutions, can Pakistan really gain any benefit from this country?
Well, I would also like to say a few words about this U-turn or this brain game thing. Okay. I think there is a realization within the PTI that they went too far on this particular issue, and they are trying to mend the relations with the United States. How far they succeed is not yet clear, but Americans also realize that changes in Pakistan are not permanent. That one group may be in power today and it may be out in the streets the next day and then it may return to power. So they would also like to keep their options open. I mean, right now they do not seem very happy with the PTI, but they would not want to sort of discontinue their engagement with the party, and that's why Mr. Sholay is meeting PTI leaders. And going back to the economy thing, I mean, sometimes I really wonder whether the economy is seen as serious an issue as it is in Pakistan, as it is in the United States and other countries. I mean, don't see so much about Pakistan, of the crisis that Pakistan is facing. I think there are more seminars and discussions and talks outside Pakistan and in Pakistan. I mean, in Washington, I have attended at least a dozen talk shows and seminars on this particular issue. There is an alarm here. People think that the Pakistani economy is close to a collapse and that Pakistan needs to take immediate, urgent, and some key steps to protect its economy. And I think the Americans, though they not assume the types of economic support that they were providing in the past, but they do not want Pakistan the Pakistani economy to collapse. They are willing to help Pakistan, and they are encouraging Pakistan to take some difficult measures to actually rebuild the economy. And I think there will be as much support as we need in that particular area, but it will not be a kind of support that we have had in the past. It will be something that help to make you realize the importance of, for instance, an export-based economy, for the importance of discouraging, say, the real estate sector and reviving the textile industry and things like that, because that is session in Washington.
Right. Right, absolutely. And that's important in terms of course, where we are headed, particularly with regards to our economic situation. Farrukh, of course, the US has talked about its support with regards to the IMF and other financial institutions, but we're still, of course, having some sort of negotiations with the IMF and still looking for a way forward. Do you think that there can be any more support extended by the US with regards to where we stand today? And secondly, as you mentioned earlier, that the US, of course, is taking a look at all other factors in terms of the relationship as well, particularly trade and investment, and that's important to Pakistan. But considering the current situation, how much of that can actually happen?
Right, Sana, I think a lot of that can happen. Regarding IMF first, I think that the US is one of the biggest stakeholders in IMF. It has incredible weightage in its board as well. So of course it can help you there too. But I think that no matter what, there is a deadline given by IMF regarding, it is 1st of March. So we have to meet our targets, and that is particularly about front loading or meeting all the necessary requirements. So I think that the government is already on track to do that. If that happens, that will be taken care of. But I think whatever is building right now is beyond that. It is very important to remember that next week there is going to be a Trade and Investment Framework Agreement Council meeting, which is a first after 2016. Right, and then you know, in spring there are going to be two other very important meetings. One is Second Energy Security Dialogue between Pakistan and the US, and the other one is Climate and Environment Working Group meeting. So there is a lot of you know, build up already visible, and I think that right now where we are at, what we hear from all the stakeholders here, is that we are negotiating the kind of environment or adjustments that might be needed to host American investment in Pakistan as well. Not the government investment, but the private sector. Already, the US is investing hugely in rebuilding lives in various parts of Pakistan, and we have seen various projects from providing clean drinking water to umpteen other issues, where they have already in a very important and robust footprint. So in the coming days, let us hope that we actually strengthen this relationship. And let me also bring up something very interesting that happened 1.5 years ago. I was you know, interviewed by NPR, the US radio you know, organization. So and that interview was about CPEC and how Pakistan and China view each other. Most of it was actually edited out, but I kept on you know, emphasizing. Right? You.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just commenting on the edited part.
Yeah, edited part, but still they usually maintain the record, so they'll have that bit also. That you know, the easiest way to win hearts and minds in Pakistan, and by the way, it is important to remember our hearts and our minds matter, is to actually enter into fray and help out when the country is really down. When China actually came to Pakistan with CPEC, at that time the country was really going through hell, and at that time no investor was ready to come to Pakistan, and China actually came with massive infrastructure project, and immediately the hearts were won, the minds were won. I think at this moment the kind of economic situation we are in, and we are ready to talk to all our neighbors as well to build our relationship. So in that situation, a US you know, investment and intervention will be most welcome, and it will be incredibly important for the relationship.
Absolutely, and that is of course something that we look forward to. Mr. Anwar, there's also of course the aspect of our relationship with other countries, particularly of course Russia. Again, something that has been cited by the former Prime Minister and the PTI chairman as being one of the reasons why he was ousted by a so-called US-led conspiracy. Of course, something he's not really standing by at the moment. But in terms of our relationship moving forward and the kind of precarious balance perhaps that exists with reference to different engagements that we have in the international community, how can we take this particular relationship forward when we also want to engage similarly with other countries, including Russia?
Well, that's what we need to work out. I mean, we are not going to get back the unipolar world that we had once. I mean, that you sit squarely in the American camp and, you know, or in the Chinese camp or in the Russian camp and forget about the rest of the world. Our relationship with each of these countries and with other countries. I mean, we have seen that we call Saudi Arabia was always that, which is a lot for this time that it was reluctant to come forward because it had other concerns, because India has become a major economic power and a lot of countries do not want to ignore India now. So we really have to, I mean, sometimes it makes it so sad that we are totally and entirely focused on our domestic politics. So what we need to do is to actually sit down and rewrite a national narrative, to invent a new national narrative that covers all these things, including the war and including foreign relations, and obviously, above all, our economy and all those things. We really need to come out with a new national narrative.
Right, Absolutely, and that's important. Farrukh, there's also the aspect when we take a look at our relationship moving forward, of course, the way that the cooperation exists with our neighbor India, between the US and India. Of course, there have been various different angles of partnership, and just recently also, and I think it's still going on, the Aero India show, in which a huge number there was a huge display by the US Defense Department as well, and of course, with regards to the way that India is moving forward with its military, and then especially the kind of fallback that has existed in terms of its defense cooperation with Russia, considering the international situation. This may be something that the US is now looking for, but this is something that has existed in the past as well. And at the same time, of course, we've also been cited as an important partner of the US, and Pakistan has had its own important relationship with the US in the past. But how does it align with the way that the US and India relationship is going forward, particularly at the front of defense cooperation?
All right, Sana, I think that it is important to actually highlight that the fact that India and Pakistan have been dehyphenated, and then Afghanistan, Pakistan have already been dehyphenated, right? It actually helps us, because when you talk about parity between India and Pakistan, we are at an incredible disadvantage. India's mills are running, its economy is getting better. Pakistan is really struggling when it comes to its economy. So in that situation, if both their relations were to be at the expense of each other, we would be actually, really at the receiving end of all negativities. Because it is now dehyphenated, no matter what India does with the US is not my lookout. My lookout is that how important and how stable the relationship between Pakistan and the US is. And of course, then India-Pakistan relationship should also move forward and should improve. You can change your friends, you cannot change your neighbors. And we already have seen erosion of stability in the region, particularly Afghanistan. And then we see that even Iran is struggling with internal discord. So at this moment, whosoever we can build bridges with is important, and it will be welcome. Now, we keep on waiting that India is going to actually show some magnanimity and reach out. So when it does, Pakistan will definitely, reciprocate in kind. I also wanted to briefly actually address the issue that you raised about multilaterality and unilaterality. Twice we have been, as I said earlier, instrumental in defining or redefining the world order. From a bipolar world, we actually played our role to end up in a unipolar world. And then in the war on terror also, a very distinct kind of challenge was emerging, where non-state actors were actually going to call shots. There too, Pakistan has played its part in changing the course of history. Despite that, every time we have played outsized role, we have been, actually been the first victims. In a unipolar world, Pakistan's importance were kept on declining, and in the war on terror also, we kept on dying, but other countries kept on benefiting from it, right, in our neighborhood. So at this moment, the most important thing is that we stop actually focusing on redefining or trying to redefine world order. We have to build relationship with all our neighbors. And Russia-Pakistan relationship, of course, it should not be at the cost of the relationship with the US. And US has actually never asked us to, remove one relationship in the favor of that relationship. Similarly, China, there is understanding in the US that Pakistan-China relations are very close. So the only thing that I really fret about, and that happened on the eve of invasion of Ukraine, was that devastating and unimaginative visit by the former Prime Minister at that time. And then if you actually had to act surprised, you shouldn't have spoken to the media. You land there and you talk to the television camera, exciting times, right? That also indicates that you are cognizant of the kind of situation that is going on. If we can maintain good relations with all of them. And you have seen Russian delegation also came to Pakistan. I think we can work wonders.
Right. Mr. Anwar, there's also the aspect of how the anti-US rhetoric in Pakistan has been quite popular and has been used quite extensively by political leadership in the past as well, and not just, of course, the PTI this time around. But considering the way forward and how we keep on emphasizing our relationship with the US, it's important also, of course, to take note of how the perception exists in terms of the public within Pakistan and how any action may be perceived as differently than the value that it is bringing on the table. In terms of the way that the people are now seeing the relationship that Pakistan has with the US and how it's going to move forward with it, do you think that the impact of the anti-US rhetoric by PTI and other parties in the past has affected the way that the people in general look at this relationship?
Yes, it has. And I think the role of a leadership is not just to seek vote from the people, but also to raise public awareness. See, America is undoubtedly the most powerful nation in the world. And still they avoid, the American politicians avoid making foreign policy issues a political issue unless it is something that suits them. Like the Ukraine issues. Ukraine is one of those issues. The Afghan war was when they needed domestic support, so they use it. But usually they avoid debating sensitive foreign policy issues. But in our country, everything becomes street politics. And I think we need to discourage that.
Right, absolutely. Farrukh, there is also the aspect that was raised and talked about regarding the essence of democratic values and something that the US, of course, has also championed all over the world. And because of that also, when we take a look forward at this relationship and how there seems to be a plan to hold a summit in this regard as well, how will exactly this be something that we're going to see in terms of our cooperation with the US, particularly keeping in mind the way that our governance exists within the country and how different institutions have been targeted, or how different matters have unfolded in the past 1 year alone. And then, of course, to have that sort of conversation at an international level, what sort of factors will play into this?
Right, Sana, I'm glad that you asked this question, because even in the US as well, a debate is going on regarding, how democracy building project might not be what it seemed all over the world. Shadi Hamid has written a book about democracy. It is called Problem of Democracy. And he actually points out that there is an inherent contradiction in two demands of the liberal democracy in the US. That most of the countries that are third world countries or Muslim countries or Asian countries, they have this problem that there are not enough liberals to actually fill a boat. So how come through democracy are they going to actually rise to the top? And he gives the example of Egyptian situation where a democratic leader was anti-West and was radical, and then he was removed by a coup. So Shadi Ahmed actually says that you should disconnect one from the other. Liberal demand from democracy or democratic process. But I believe that both work in tandem. We are actually very flexible societies, and we have been actually only 75 years ago Pakistan was a colony of America, and there was secularism and moderation as well. So whatever has happened, it has happened in the Cold War and then war on terror. But frankly, this hatred or xenophobia, we are not a xenophobic nation, by the way. So all this narrative or mega narrative was actually being sponsored from somewhere. And there was the religious element in the society or this country was receiving mega donations from the Middle Eastern countries, Iran also, elsewhere, right? Then, of course, there was also India's influence. It wanted Pakistan to be anti-America so that we remain the pariah. And of course, then the story kept on cooking, and the way we interpreted religion, somehow we started seeing America versus Islam as two competing values. So I don't think that is the case. I think that Pakistan can become a liberal democracy if it continues at it. When Imran Khan Sahib was Prime Minister, at that time there was a summit on democracy or quality of democracy as well, and Pakistan did not go. So this time, whatever happens, Pakistan should be, and I keep on saying this repeatedly, we should not leave any room unattended wherever there is important dialogue about policy which affects our lives. So I think in the long run, this cooperation is going to moderate the forces within Pakistan as well, and democracy can be strengthened and institutions, and then liberal values can also actually be enhanced.
Right. Mr. Anwar, there's also the concern when we take a look at this situation and our relationship with the US that whosoever is in power or whosoever has the administration in the US will also impact this relationship. And we've heard in the past that foreign policies of countries perhaps are not largely impacted by who the president or the prime minister of a country is. But how much so do you think it's going to impact? Because that, of course, is something that was also, again, cited by the former regime, particularly with regards to the Biden administration. And then it was, of course, different in the Trump era as well. There is, of course, the concern of Republicans and Democrats within the US as well. But how much of that aspect within the US will impact how the policy decisions are going to be conducted with Pakistan? Mr. Anwar, are you with us?
Yes, he must be, but
unfortunately, I don't think that Mr. Anwar is with us. But thank you, Mr. Anwar, for taking the time out and joining us. And perhaps we'll talk more on this issue soon. But Farrukh, same question to you in terms of who the administration is in the US. Of course, the US statement is that they don't have much concern or a policy stance as who the political party is in Pakistan in power. Do we share the same stance with regards to who is in power in the US?
Right, Sana, I think that politics of a country is its internal matter. So we shouldn't be actually, as a policy level, at a state level, we should not be concerned who is actually calling shots there. But of course, it matters who actually believes in democracy and democratic values all over the world. I think that the current US administration is an important partner, and we'll keep on working with them. Regarding our own house, Sana, here, the biggest problem is that we keep on thinking that this politician will come or that politician will come and topple the apple cart. I don't think that had it not been, a very complicated situation where Imran Khan Sahib already felt that he is being eased out, or where he is being pushed out of power. Remember, before Russia visit also, there were rumors that there is going to be a vote of no confidence against him. So it was a gambit that he played, and he, of course, it failed, but he tried to actually capitalize on that, and that's why it actually was narrative building exercise. It doesn't have to be like that any longer in the future. Whosoever comes in power should complete their 5 years term, and then of course usually one can hope that we will produce a less hung parliament. So if there is stability and there is less chance of removal from power, politicians will not actually resort to these desperate measures. Having said that, one aspect that I have to actually really highlight here. You were earlier talking about IMF and how Pakistan has to go to IMF again and again, and at this moment it seems that it is the only counter that is open. Why would that be? That would be because over the years, because of our misgovernance, because of our miscalculation and mishandling, we have been losing options when it comes to economy. Similarly, in foreign policy also, remember our discussion when India actually abrogated Article 370 and 35A. I kept on saying that we are in this situation because we have ended up with no cards up our sleeves, right? So what do? Improve your governance, improve your handling of situation, and keep on working on all their relationship. There shouldn't be a country where you have a hostile government in power, right? So how do you do that? You cannot change their election patterns. All you can do is you can work on your image, you can work on your relations, you can work on your own fundamentals in your own country, economic and otherwise, so that those countries don't feel pressured or feel that if they deal with you, there will be a stigma that will actually get attached to them. So if we do that, we can really improve and we can get out of this hole very quickly.
Moving forward, Farrukh, what do you think is the biggest challenge or threat to our relationship with the US?
At this moment, Sanam, I think that everything that is threat to any relationship has to do with our own precarious situation. Our economic situation is such that Mark Rubin actually wrote an article before Imran Khan was removed from power that Pakistan is going to collapse, God forbid, and that the world should prepare itself for Pakistan's impending collapse, right? Of course, our economy is in very bad shape, and we should actually be working very hard to revive it. But I don't think that these predictions, there are two countries about whom, all predictions about failure have actually been proven wrong. One is us, Pakistan. The other is our neighbor that we keep on fighting with, India. People keep on saying tukde tukde and all that about India as well. Hasn't happened, right? In Pakistan, of course, 71 was a very different story. But after that, there hasn't been any territorial loss to Pakistan, right? So I think that everybody who keeps on actually betting at the possibility of Pakistan going down should realize that we have the capacity to keep on surviving. So we will survive, inshallah. And after that, our relationship, remember, the weakness, economic weakness actually makes you vulnerable, because whosoever is then helping you can ask you of things that you might not need to do, right? If you actually improve your economics, and Bangladesh is we keep on talking about the wrong Bangladesh model, where there was a Supreme Court-led government for quite some time. Let us talk about the right Bangladesh model, and that is improve your economy, focus on filling the governance gaps, and strengthen it so much that it is thought that India, which is a rising economy of the region, despite that, India has a middle income trap. And do you know, Sana, who is actually exploiting that situation? Who is importing for the poor and the middle class of India? It is Bangladesh, right? So just understand how you have to restructure yourself to get better results, and that can be done. That in my view is the only challenge we have got. We don't have any threat from Afghan Taliban in the long run, even India as well. But this problem, our economic vulnerability makes us so vulnerable. Either we end up doing desperate things, or then we have to compromise on our principles.
Absolutely. So moving forward, what needs to be done is looking inwards and, of course, being more reflective of where we stand today and make wise decisions. Thank you, Farrukh, for being part of the show as always. And, of course, Mr. Anwar Saab, who joined us earlier in the show as well as part of the discussion. Much remains to be seen, of course, as to how our relationship with the US is going to evolve. But so far, there are good signs coming in with the US and the statements that have been coming forward with regards to Pakistan's value as a strategic partner being emphasized. Of course, we consider the same with the US. But of course, as Farrukh earlier mentioned, much depends on how we're going to act and how soon we get our own things in order. That's all that we have from the debate. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you Monday.